All right, UPSC peeps. Back again for your daily hit of current affairs. March 29th, 2025, kicking off part 1 of the deep dive.
Ready to dig into some serious issues, eh?
You know it. Today's mix, some brand new developments, maybe a few familiar faces. Great for that extra revision as we all gear up for exam day, right?
Absolutely. We've got a lineup that hits those crucial UPSC prep points.
Sweet. So what's on the menu?
We're tackling NATO's latest statement on those missing U.S. soldiers, plus a fascinating collaboration between the KAG and BISAG-N. Then there's the discovery of a brand new fish species, Chananachi, the name's a mouthful. We'll cover the Defense Ministry's big contracts for NAMAS, break down exercise Prachan Prohar, see what's up with the Gaia Mission, check in on Mount Kenya's glaciers, swing by the Indian Bison Fest, unpack that USCIRF recommendation about RNAW, and finally, we'll wrap up with the free movement regime discussions with Myanmar. Ready to roll.
Let's dive in. Okay, first up, we're heading over to Lithuania, right? Where NATO had everyone on edge with that news about missing U.S. soldiers.
Yeah, talk about a headline grabber. Initially, things were a bit murky. You know, NATO Secretary General Rutte's early comments, well, some folks jumped the gun thinking the soldiers were,
Gone.
Yeah. But turns out he was just reacting to unverified reports swirling around at the time. Point is, the search for those 4 U.S. soldiers is still very much active.
So definitely still a live situation, very much developing. But can we back up a sec? Where exactly were these soldiers operating and what were they up to?
They're part of the U.S. Army's 1st Brigade, 3rd Infantry Division, and they were smack dab in the middle of training exercises near Pabradai, Lithuania. Now, here's why this spot is particularly interesting for us. From a UPSC standpoint, it's super close to the Belarus border.
Ah, yeah, I see where you're going with this. Geopolitically, that's a sensitive area.
Understatement of the year.
No.
Their armored vehicle was found submerged in water, and like we said, recovery's still in progress. But Lithuania, along with Latvia and Estonia, they're all NATO members, right? And their history with Russia, now with Belarus in the mix. It's complicated.
Yeah, layers upon layers. And after what happened in Ukraine in 2022, that whole Baltic region has been on high alert.
Totally. NATO's presence there. Exercises. Through the roof. Belarus is tight with Russia, shares borders with these NATO countries. You can see why this incident, even if it's just an accident, has everyone's attention.
For sure. It really throws a spotlight on that whole collective defense thing, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Article 5, the big one, NATO's bedrock. Attack one, you attack all. Hasn't been used much, only after 9/11, but just knowing it's there, it's a huge deterrent. Shows you how seriously they take security in that region.
Makes sense. Okay, let's switch gears. Back to India now. Something interesting caught my eye. The Comptroller and Auditor General of India teaming up with the Bhaskaracharya National Institute of Space Application and Geoinformatics. BISAG, for short. Sounds like a powerful combo, right?
It's all about leveraging technology, you see. Imagine the CAG, with its auditing power, tapping into BISAG's expertise in, geographic information systems, remote sensing. They can really analyze government projects, resource allocation, the whole shebang, but with incredible precision.
That's pretty cool. But I gotta admit, I'm not super familiar with BISAG-N. Can you give us a quick rundown?
No problem. Think of them as a specialist group, an autonomous scientific society working under MIDI, the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, HQ'd in Gandhinagar, Gujarat.
Gujarat, huh? Interesting.
Their main gig is pushing the boundaries in geospatial technology research, collaboration, training, the whole 9 yards. Satellite communication, geoinformatics, all that jazz.
So what does that actually look like in practice? What kind of solutions are they cooking up?
They're the go-to for map-based GIS. We're talking designing those databases, creating super detailed maps, even handling things like data migration, making sure everything plays nice together. Then they've got the software side, development, customization, integrating with existing systems, and of course, their expert consultants.
Wow, so like a one-stop shop for all things GIS.
Pretty much. And they're big on using remote sensing data, which is huge for things like keeping an eye on agriculture, water resources, even assessing disaster situations. We're talking large-scale projects, mapping out entire regions, managing environmental resources. They do it all.
Sounds like they've got their hands full. But I bet they're a valuable asset for the government.
Oh, you bet. They're working directly with tons of ministries and state government departments, helping them use these super advanced technologies for better planning and sustainable development.
Awesome. Okay, time for something completely different. From satellites to, well, fish. A new species of snakehead was just discovered in Meghalaya, the Chananachi. Gotta love those biodiversity wins, right?
Nature always has surprises up its sleeve. This little guy was hanging out in a shallow, slow-flowing stream that feeds into the Simsang River system near Chakpot village in Meghalaya. Picture this: sandy bottom, tons of leaf litter, and a bunch of other fish species sharing the space.
Sounds like a pretty chill spot. But what makes this Chananachi stand out from the other snakeheads? What's its unique flair?
It's all about the looks, really. Medium size, rocking this two-tone body, super slender. Color-wise, think creamy yellow to grayish blue with some pale blue marbling underneath. Then there's this series of 10 to 12 pale brown saddle-like markings along its back. And the kicker, no spots, splotches, or bands on its tail fin. That's how you know it's the Chananachi.
Gotcha, unique tail fin, check. It just goes to show how much incredible biodiversity we have in India. Okay, let's shift gears again, this time to defense. Big news. The Defense Ministry just signed some mega contracts for the NAG anti-tank missile system, or NOMI.
We're talking 2,500 crore worth of investment here. And it's all about homegrown tech, developed by the Defense Research and Development Laboratory, DRDL, which is part of DRDO, And production is going to be handled by Bharat Dynamics Limited, BDL.
Okay, for those of us who aren't exactly military experts, break it down. What is NEMIS and what makes it so special?
Picture this: a tracked vehicle, super mobile, armed with the NAG anti-tank guided missile, ATGM for short, mounted on a BMP-2 chassis. Now, this is a third-generation missile, which means it's fire and forget. It locks onto its target before launch using an imaging infrared IIR seeker, and once it's fired, the launch vehicle can scoot out of there, no hanging around.
Smart.
Oh, it gets better. This thing is built to take out the toughest tanks, even those with fancy composite or reactive armor. And get this, it can strike at night. All-weather capability, baby.
So how does it actually take down a target? Different modes or something?
You got it. 2 main attack modes. First, there's top attack mode. It climbs high after launch, then swoops down onto the tank's roof, hitting the weakest point. Then there's direct attack mode, which is more straightforward, lower trajectory, hitting the target head-on. Range-wise, we're talking 500 meters to 4 kilometers. Pretty impressive.
Wow, that's a serious piece of tech.
Right. And we should mention Namika. That's the BMP-2 vehicle carrying all this firepower. It can even handle water crossings, amphibious stuff. Talk about versatility.
That's wild. So is this the only version of the NAG missile system, or are there others?
There's the Helena, the helicopter-launched version. It aced its test back in 2018, and they're working on integrating it with our attack choppers, the Rudra, and the light combat helicopter, LCH.
So we're covering all our bases: land, air.
Nice. Speaking of different domains, the Indian Armed Forces just wrapped up a major exercise called Prashan Prahar in Arunachal Pradesh.
This was the big one. All 3 services involved Army, Air Force, the works operating together in that challenging high-altitude terrain. So what was the main point of this exercise?
It was all about simulating those potential future conflicts, right? The kind of complex situations we might face in the eastern sector of the LAC, the line of actual control.
Right, that's a crucial area.
Totally. The exercise started with deploying all sorts of advanced surveillance tech, long-range recon planes from the IAF, those maritime patrol aircraft from the Navy but adapted for land use, helicopters, UAVs, you name it. They even had space-based monitoring and the Army Special Forces involved.
So eyes everywhere.
Exactly. They needed that complete picture to identify the simulated enemy targets. And once those targets were locked, they unleashed a coordinated barrage of firepower.
Now we're talking. What kind of firepower are we talking about here?
Everything. Fighter jets, those long-range rocket artillery systems, conventional artillery, armed helicopters, swarms of drones, loitering munitions, even kamikaze drones, and all this happening in a simulated electronic warfare environment, where communications are disrupted.
So basically, as close to the real deal as you can get without actually...
Exactly. It was all about testing our ability to operate across the full spectrum of conflict. And, this exercise actually builds on the lessons learned from exercise Purvi Prahar, which happened back in November 2024. That one was more focused on the air power side of things.
Right, so building up our expertise step by step. Okay, let's zoom out now, way out. From Earth to space, the European Space Agency just announced the passivation of the Gaia mission. Does that mean it's over?
March 27th, 2025 was the day, yeah. Basically, they drained its batteries and sent it off to a nice, quiet retirement orbit around the sun. End of an era, you could say.
What a journey it's been. Can you refresh our memory? What was Gaia all about, and what were some of its biggest hits?
Launched back in 2013, Gaia was all about creating the ultimate map of our Milky Way. A 3D map, super accurate, using astrometry, which basically means measuring the positions and movements of stars and other objects.
Ambitious.
Oh, yeah. They parked it at Lagrange Point 2, about 1.5 million kilometers from Earth, a sweet spot for unobstructed views of the universe.
So what kind of tech did it have on board to pull that off?
It was decked out. Twin telescopes feeding a gigantic camera with almost 1 billion pixels. Back then, it was the biggest camera ever sent to space. And the instruments. A super precise astrometer for measuring positions, a photometer to figure out brightness and color, and a spectrometer to analyze the stuff stars are made of.
That's some serious science.
It was a data goldmine. They mapped out the Milky Way in amazing detail, revealing its structure like never before. They even found that our galactic disk is warped, kind of wobbly, probably from past encounters with other galaxies. And those galactic collisions, they might have actually triggered new star formation, potentially even our own sun. Then there's the black holes. Gaia found a bunch that don't emit light, the kind you can only detect through their gravity. One of them is among the closest black holes to Earth ever discovered.
This is crazy.
Oh, and let's not forget about asteroids. It tracked over 150,000 of them in our solar system, helping us understand those potential space hazards.
So Gaia left a huge legacy. That's for sure. Okay, let's bring it back down to Earth, but for a less cheerful topic. The glaciers on Mount Kenya are melting fast.
It's one of those stark reminders of climate change's impact. Mount Kenya, Africa's second highest peak, is particularly vulnerable.
Just how bad is the ice loss?
Pretty alarming. The Lewis Glacier, which used to be a major feature there, has shrunk drastically. Some studies are saying that the entire mountain could be ice-free by 2030. A 2011 study already showed significant ice loss, and recent satellite data from 2023 indicates that only about 4.2% of the ice cover from 1900 remains today. It's vanishing before our eyes.
Yikes. Not good. For those of us who haven't climbed Mount Kenya yet, can you give us a quick overview?
Mount Kenya is in central Kenya, just below the equator. Its highest peak, Bashan, reaches an elevation of 5,199 meters. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, recognized for its unique environment and cultural significance. It's actually an extinct stratovolcano, worn down over millions of years, and importantly, it's home to some of the last remaining tropical glaciers in Africa. So seeing them disappear so rapidly is a major red flag.
Yeah, a powerful symbol of what's happening globally. Okay, let's end on a more hopeful note with a cool conservation initiative. The Debrigar Wildlife Sanctuary just had its first ever Indian Bison Fest.
It's a great way to raise awareness, right? Get people excited about conservation and the ecological importance of the sanctuary.
Totally. So tell us about Debrigar. Where is it and what makes it special?
It's in the Bargarh district of Odisha, near the Hirakud Dam on the Mahanadi River. Historically, it was a base for the freedom fighter Veer Surendra Sai during his fight against the British. It became a wildlife sanctuary in 1985. It's got these dry, deciduous mixed forests supporting a whole bunch of plant and animal life. Tigers, sloth bears, leopards, spotted deer, antelope, sambar, nilgai, you name it.
Sounds like a nature lover's paradise.
Yeah.
And of course, the star of the show, the Indian bison, or gaur. What should we know about these guys?
They're magnificent creatures, one of the largest living bovines. They roam the forested hills and grasslands of South and Southeast Asia. India is a stronghold for them, with a significant chunk of the global population estimated to be between 13,000 and 30,000.
Not a huge number.
Right. They're listed as vulnerable by the IUCN, and they're on site appendicize, meaning they're highly protected. In India, they're under Schedule 3rd of the Wildlife Protection Act, 1972. Oh, and fun fact, they're the state animal of both Goa and Bihar.
Okay, now for some international news with an Indian angle. The U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, USCIF, just made a recommendation about India's RNAW, its external intelligence agency.
Yeah, they're suggesting targeted sanctions against RNAW based on allegations of their involvement in assassination plots against Sikh separatists. But it's super important to remember that this is just a recommendation from USCIRF, nothing more.
So remind us, what exactly is USCIRF and what's their deal?
They're an independent, bipartisan U.S. federal government commission created by the International Religious Freedom Act of 1998. Their job is to keep an eye on religious freedom violations around the world and then advise the U.S. government on what to do about it. They issue an annual report, identify countries of particular concern, and make policy recommendations. They base their work on international human rights standards, especially Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is all about freedom of thought, conscience, and religion.
Makes sense. Okay, last but not least, let's talk about the free movement regime, FMR, between India and Myanmar. Lots of chatter about that lately.
Yeah, the future of that agreement is up in the air right now. In February 2024, the Union Home Minister said they were planning to scrap it. Seems like concerns about the ethnic conflict in Manipur played a role, with some folks suggesting that the open border was making things worse.
But some states weren't happy about that, right?
Yep, Mizoram and Nagaland voiced strong opposition to ditching the FMR, and so far there's been no official notification or a bilateral agreement to actually end it. It's still in limbo.
So what exactly is the free movement regime? How does it work?
Basically, it's a deal between India and Myanmar that lets members of hill tribes living within 16 kilometers of the border cross over without a visa. They get a border pass that's good for a year and lets them stay for up to 2 weeks at a time.
So pretty easy to go back and forth.
Yeah, the goal was to preserve those historical, cultural, and social links between the communities living on both sides. It also boosted local trade and made it easier for families separated by the border to visit each other. It was a good example of cross-border cooperation, part of India's Act East policy.
Sounds like a pretty good deal. When did it start?
The informal movement's been going on forever, because of the shared ethnicity and culture. But they formalized it in 2018, inspired by India's Act East policy. The states directly affected are Arunachal Pradesh, Nagaland, Manipur, and Mizoram, the ones sharing a border with Myanmar.
And that brings us to the end of part 1 of our deep dive into current affairs for March 29th, 2025. Wow, we covered a lot of ground today.
One sure did. It's a wild world out there full of interconnected events, both here at home and globally. And for you, dear UPSC aspirants, understanding those connections and what they mean for India's place in the world is key for your exam prep.
Exactly. So use this deep dive as a springboard, okay? Think about what stood out to you, what sparked your curiosity, and then go deeper. Do your own research, dig into those topics that really grabbed your attention.
And hey, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to stay tuned for our next deep dive into the world of current affairs. Your support keeps us going.
All right, one last food for thought before we sign off. Thinking about that free movement regime, it's tricky, right? How can India balance national security with those long-standing cultural and economic ties in its border regions? It's a tough question with no easy answers, something worth pondering.
Well said. Until next time, folks, happy studying. See you soon.